I will go away the timestamp inside the description so that you can pass the old bits. My entitled sisters demanded that I let them hire out my vacation home for earnings. Once I refused, their husbands broke in and are now going through fees past. Off these days, my oldsters decided to host a barbecue, due to the fact, I guess that is what older people do. I declined because I really do not like my sisters, their husbands, or their kid's spouse, and I are childless mother, then forced the wife. Lengthy story brief. We went by. The point. We arrived, there were about 20 people there. My sisters and their husbands have been already solidly buzzed, drunk. Absolutely. My mother was spending 100% of her time trying to preserve the nieces and nephews, while 7 to 11 more or less below control. My dad had strategically retreated to the whirlpool part of the pool, with small cooler full of beers spouse, and I made small talk with miscellaneous people, ate meals, and had a frozen margarita. Sisters SL Bills took turns criticizing us for being past due, now not being in our swimsuits and screwing up the vibe whatever traditional suburban summer get-together approximately 45 minutes, and of the youngsters ran at one of the neighbor visitors who changed into status next to the pool and pushed her in. She turned into at the pool steps, stumbled in, however didn't fall, so best were given half wet. She turned into honestly very unhappy about it, but she failed to make a scene, just went over to wherein the dad and mom had been grabbed. Their towels, dried herself off, and left sisters and payments notion. It became all super a laugh. A bit later, I was status, some toes far away from the pool, chatting away with a person. I saw 3 of the children running full tilt at me from the corner of my eye. Manifestly, I changed into next. Not that it's extraordinarily hard to outwit younger children, but I simply jumped out of their way on the closing 2D. All 3 of them ran straight into the pool at complete pace. Most of the opposite visitors, such as my spouse and me, commenced laughing. However, their moms, who, as I mentioned, were quite shit-faced, surely freaked out reputedly of the kids couldn't swim even though they have been in swimsuits. For the reason that I wasn't in swim tools, I stepped back from the pool and let different humans fish the kids out. The youngsters had been bawling their heads off like they lost a limb at that point. All hell broke loose. The 4 under the influence of alcohol, mother and father have been yelling at anybody in widespread, and me especially, for nearly letting their youngsters drown. And also, due to the fact 2 of the youngsters have been videoing the trick using their dad and mom iPhones, which were now at the lowest of the pool. Certainly one of my bills got into the pool to try to retrieve the telephones. However, his BMI and BAC made that not possible. No AIA, I advised my sisters. It was their activity to observe their youngsters, and that if whatever had befell to them, it might have been their duty, no longer mine. There were some quite robust phrases on both sides. Spouse and I left. After the alternative invoice fell over and face planted while yelling at us, now they are announcing I ought to have let the little shits knock me into the pool and feature their fun and ruin my cell phone. So Ida sideward, dad of path never were given out of the whirlpool. Relevant feedback thoughts from Oopie. I realized they're simply kids, and that they had been simply having amusing the truth that they, even though this become okay, is more of a reflection on their dad and mom than them. Just wish we hadn't long passed. It is best to look my oldsters and their neighbors. However, I virtually honestly do not like my sisters, or their husbands. They don't cover their envy folks, and they're just laborious to be round greater. Approximately why Oop does not care for a number of his own family, it is greater of an oil and water sort of thing. I've by no means been near my sisters, they may be 8 and 10 years older than me. I also do not have lots and not unusual with their husbands, they're K-men, but I just don't deliver a crap. Approximately the things which might be important to them, and vice versa. I do know that the 4 of them are relatively envious of our lifestyle. Both the sisters are stay-at domestic moms. Each, the husbands make precise cash. One makes tremendously greater than I do. However, my spouse and I actually have professional careers, we don't have children, and we are way extra responsible with money as an end result. We have lots more investments, etc., and we do not must pressure motors full of kid particles, and we take nice journeys a few times a year. It definitely GRS on each sisters, and by extension, their husbands, so we get a few petty behavior from them on an ongoing foundation. Universal, neither my spouse nor I revel in their corporation. That's why I wanted to bypass the get-together, simply not really worth it to me, but my wife is a fine man or woman, and is generally satisfied to see them hopefully subsequent time. Your wife may not experience guilted into going. It truly is probable the only fine issue. A good way to come out of this spouse is a lot greater tolerant and forgiving than I am towards my siblings, however primarily based on what she became. Pronouncing on the way domestic, I suppose she's had it with them as well. Your dad sounds incredible. Yeah, my dad's very kickback. He loves being around businesses of human beings used to be an income likes humans to experience themselves and is virtually taking part in existence as a retiree. He and different men with him just sat there and watched. The show Mother's cool too. However, the state of affairs dissatisfied her kids. Okay, the children are excellent by the time I left. They were interior-looking TV. I assume they may be 7, 9, 10, 10, and 11. It become the center 3 who played Kamikaze. With me, I'm guessing the 11-year antique egg them on. She's normally the hoop chief, you word. The element approximately your parents hosting a barbecue. Oddly, I had to shorten the submit to FT in the character limit. My folks are gregarious and like to have humans over. They have the traditional fantastic for enjoyable residence and are usually coming up with a cause. To get collectively, they had desired all people to be at their location for the 4th of July. However, one among my sisters and her family were on a holiday. So this turned into a fake 4th of July birthday celebration. Whole with flags, purple, white, and blue decorations, fish fry, a margarita device, etc. Sparklers had been promised to the children. My nieces and nephews had been the handiest kids there. All of the buddies are older like my dad and mom. Oop is voted now. Not the A Hollow update published August 17th, 2023, almost 1 month later. Firstly, my parents tell me that my nieces and nephews are all properly swimmers, and that they use the pool all the time. The 7-year vintage is still a beginner. However, he loves the water. My sister just said they couldn't swim. So appearance terrible, to be fair. Not one of the kids are allowed within the deep stop that is wherein they fell in. It became the 2 10-year-olds and the 9 12-months-old who attempted to push me into the pool. Once we left, the party ended on a pretty bitter be aware. My under the influence of alcohol brother in regulation who face pled, while yelling at me, had to go to an urgent care area and get his face stitched up. He become too toasted to power. So Dad took him. Dad changed into very not happy. Approximately this late that nighttime, my sister started out a collection textual content and stated a few really nasty crap their husbands threw in a few comments as nicely. Wife and I blocked the 4 of them, my mother referred to as me. She changed into pretty disappointed approximately what they stated she and Dad had been inside the chat, and I do not blame her due to the texts. My folks insisted my sister's payments come over day after today, Sunday, without their kids to get a few things instantly, and lay down some floor policies. Mom's wording, the end result became a contrite if unenthusiastic apology from the siblings through my mother's telephone. I'm satisfied my spouse was with me when they referred to as her hard stares kept me from saying what I desired to. I simply advised them thank you, and that we felt no want to discuss it. In addition, considering I thought matters were settled, I unblocked them that night. I were given a textual content from one of the bills telling me the telephones priced all forks and asking when I'd be buying them. WTF, I spoke back by no means, took a screenshot of his text and forwarded it to my folks with the observe that we have been performed with this nonsense. We are going no contact with sisters' spouses, and no longer to ask us to any greater vacations or get-togethers. If they may be gift, then I blocked the sisters and their spouses again. At that point, the actually hit the fan dad known as them and ripped them a new one of other matters. He told them the grandkids were now not welcome at his location indefinitely, considering that my mother frequently provides unfastened babysitting that got them quite rattled. He also, with my siblings a couple of days later, my sister and their husbands got here to our place unintroduced to express regret. An individual we had been out to dinner and that they left a word. One sister also called me at paintings too. I dispatched her to voicemail. We have decided being no touch is the nice element for the indefinite destiny and have not interacted with them for the ultimate 3+ weeks. In my view, I'm achieved. They could cross-pound sand applicable comments. How lifestyles has been, it has been less than a month. But I actually have to say that blocking them has truly made our lives pretty greater. Peaceful. I hadn't realized how a great deal ongoing low-level drama they invent. It is not tough poisonous. They're not bad people, they're simply tiresome, and petty, and I, in my view, do not care about them. The use of the weekend area, it is ours technically, but we offered it for my parents. They manage it and decide who uses it. When they are not, we pay. For all of the operating costs and taxes, one precise issue about this blow-up is that we now understand what we'll be doing with the property. When my folks get older, I was prepared to take over, managing it, allocating weekends, keeping it and such. However, now we realize we're going to just promote it. And if we need to go to the mountains, we will simply lease an Airbnb. Oops, parents. Yeah, my oldsters aren't dumb. They're quite laid back though, very lots. Live and let live. I figure they'll ease up on all of this quickly. But it truly is their decision. We nonetheless might not be attending any circle of relatives' activities for the foreseeable destiny. What sucks for my sisters is that they're probably very worried that I'll keep them. From the usage of the cabin, I won't. That is up to mom and dad until they're older. And it places an end to one of the sisters' myth of building a compound of houses when we inherit the assets, which I've known about for a while, and it's simply unnoticed. Normally, the lots up there are simplest. Have one region that may be constructed on. However, this piece of property is way large as it's on the cease of a street. As a minimum, 3 homes with remarkable perspectives will be positioned on that land. They are, no, genuinely sorry, they just need matters from you. I agree. Completely. Their apologies aren't honest, and I haven't any plans to engage with them every time soon. Concerning them using the holiday home, this is really my parents' decision. Yes, technically, I very own it and cover all of the charges. However, I offered it for them and gave them everyday control over it. They're suitable human beings and they constantly wanted a getaway vicinity for the circle of relatives, but there is no way they could have ever sold it themselves. I may want to find the money to buy it for them, because I've been lucky, financially, make investments, like a demon. Plus, I got a big bonus. The identical YR, I bought my domestic and moved in with my now wife. I do not care if my oldsters allow my siblings use the residence. However, I will admit I'm taking part in my sister's pain over finding out that I ought to manage to pay to shop for the location, and let my parents use it, at the same time as in no way citing it to them. Dad modified the lock code once they went up ultimate week. So now simplest he mother, my spouse and I, have it close to mom, babysitting the children. She tells me that when a week, she and once in a while dad were going over to every sister's location and spending the day with the youngsters whilst faculty started, she is going to pick out each installation from faculty as soon as per week on separate days and take them domestic, spend the night with them. She says the 5 of them collectively pressure her out. However, one after the other, they may be first-rate. Mom and dad have each told me they don't plan on having my sisters and their households return to their region inside the foreseeable destiny, and that they are enjoying the quiet. My bet is that they had been already bored with the old dynamic and used the pool celebration nonsense as an excuse to make some modifications to the relationships. One fun note on Wise. Put up, become eliminated from IDA, consistent with the message I just studied from the other subs moderator. The violence was assets, damage. I nevertheless do not get it. The smartphone's being ruined, I guess. Ridiculous update to the replace August 26, 2023. 9 days from preceding post. Well, it's been an thrilling previous couple of days. I concept that had hit the fan earlier than, however, it was greater of a fart compared to what's occurred this week. For this to make feel, I want to offer a few financial context. My oldsters have not ever been any desirable at saving money. I've been doing their taxes for years, so I understand pretty an awful lot the entirety about them. Money-wise, their residence is paid for, and that they have minimum debt, but they failed to store lots for retirement. Both of them get Social Security, Dad receives a solid pension, and that they have a chunk of financial savings. But there is no treasure chest within the basement. I sold their modern vehicle for them when they retired, a retirement gift, so they may have something best to force it. Became the first automobile in possibly 20 years. They failed to rent. My sisters are satisfied. The folks are dripping with cash, and that our parents will be leaving the two of them the entirety, seeing that I don't want extra cash in order that they've in no way cared about saving either. Seems my oldest sister and her husband, they have got 3 kids, were dwelling past their method for a while and are in economic straits. They have maxed out their credit score card and are at the back of on their car rentals to the factor that one is set to get repossessed. He bragged inside the past approximately making X per 12 months, but it turns out to be approximately half of that. She confessed all this to Mom on Tuesday, due to the fact they want a mortgage and due to the fact, and this became a WTF second for Mom and Dad, that for the last 3 years in preference to staying at the holiday house. Regularly, she's actually been renting it out once a month or so and pocketing the coins. We are talking doll 2, a 0 plus for a weekend, and at the least $4,000 for every week, with her being cut off from using the place she's needed to cancel one institution already. She's now worried they may lose the whole thing. My parents are not in any function to offer them a loan. My other sister was aware about her renting out the region, but of route has never said something. I suspect she's performed the equal thing as well. Due to the fact I went up there as soon as to drop off an ATV, I had labored on, and there has been a circle of relatives there who claim to be staying there with my sister, her family, and they'd long passed to Metropolis for something. On the time I allow it pass, I figured she'd loan out the house to some friends. However, I've usually questioned. I located all this out via my folks, who are quite confused out about it. Mom extra than Dad. He is, especially simply annoyed about it all. I recognize Dad feels bete, and I believe he is embarrassed that he's in no position to assist his daughter out. He did reiterate that as lengthy as it's as much as him. The women might not be the use of the holiday home every time. Soon my parents allow me realize what's occurring, due to the fact they figured my sisters could put a full court press on me subsequent. And they have been proper on Thursday. My sisters got here to our vicinity again without husbands this time, and waited out of doors. The door till I got home, I had to select among preventing with them in public, them creating a scene if I went in without them, or allowing them to in, so I let them in. I were given a tale from the older sister, with the more youthful one backing her up concerning why I needed to allow them to use the mountain vicinity once more right now. In addition, they stated I've been a shitty brother and that I had to step up and plan on paying for their youngsters' college training in view. That's what circle of relatives does. I allow them to pitch their tale, then called them out based totally on what my parents had told me. Matters went to from there. There was denial, crying, cursing, yelling. You call it? I swear my ears are nevertheless ringing. 2 days later may not lie. I said some actually suggesting shitty things. To them, however, not anything that wasn't actual. They ultimately left. After approximately an hour after that, I took a shower and laid down after I were given up. My wife became domestic, and her first words have been that she'd had to block more smartphone numbers, due to the fact my sisters had been blowing up our phones from new ones. Oldsters messaged me the day prior to this, asking me to call. I'm certain my sisters have informed them a few version of what befell. However, I'm no longer up to rehashing it, yet I'm normally a quite active character, but this drama has me crushed down. I had just sufficient strength today to pressure as much as the holiday house and padlock the entrance gate close. I'm the only one with a key. I'm guessing with a view to be sufficient to make certain my siblings leave the location alone. They likely die. Trying to stroll for 400-yard uphill to get to the residence. New updates from here. Update 3, put up September 12, 2023. 2. 5 weeks from last replace. Yet any other update concerning the cluster F. This is my extended circle of relatives concept. It might be time given what has gone on during the last 2 weeks after my sisters got here to my vicinity. My mother and father informed me they have been achieved with coping with a vacation. Domestics sounded just like the sisters have been pressuring them to let them use the vicinity again. Basically, my parents handed the obligation for place over to me and told me it became my problem from here on out, and they might taking care of habitual upkeep, replacing wiped out objects, etc. Anyways, they decided they failed to need to be in the middle of all this crap. While I do not blame them, I'm disillusioned because the rattling location turned into presupposed to be something for them to enjoy and hang out in, and they use it regularly. Plus, I've by no means cared that they let my sisters and their families use it, because truly I've always idea that became my dad and mom known as, even though I technically own it. However, now my folks are going to be within the position of now not having access without me being worried, and that adjustments the entire dynamic of the location. I've taken several steps to secure the vicinity. I already cited that I locked the gate. It has a heavy-duty chain and the great lock. I should discover I additionally did a full reset on all the door keypads and created all new codes. Protection cameras got set up the day prior to this. That's virtually pretty cool. Due to the fact the installer convinced me to position a high-re one that looks out over the valley. The system cost me manner extra than I concept it would. However, the peace of thoughts is well worth it. The installer additionally put up signs and symptoms on the assets, saying the place became monitored by means of video. I additionally mounted a heavy-duty lockout for the water shut-off drain valve. I hope to hell it lose the keys for it, because if I do, it'll be a bear to try to do away with. Have not informed every person. However, my wife that the water is locked off. And again, simplest. We have the keys. Final week, I were given separate calls at my office from each of the husbands seeking to persuade me to allow them to use the residence like they continually have. The older one had long passed up with a few pals for a man hangout, but could not get in due to the gate lock. He was quite pissed and embarrassed, approximately being locked out. I'm certain he might have damaged the lock if he may want to have all through his name he saved, bouncing between pushy and victimhood. At one point, he threatened to tear that gate out of the goddamn ground. He additionally admitted they had been renting it out to 3 friends that they wished the cash I became ruining their commercial enterprise and that I have to refund their visitors. Cash me F that I need to have recorded the verbal exchange with him, but I don't know a way to try this from an office cell phone besides the opposite invoice. Simply appeared like he was being made to name by my sister. He didn't sincerely placed up a fight when I advised him not to plot on ever the use of the vicinity once more. In any case, I advised them they can't use the location. And no longer to invite once more at this factor. I'm considering selling the vacation home spouse, and I might not use it sufficient to justify retaining it, and it is no longer like there is going to be any circle of relatives get-togethers there. Anytime soon, I noted promoting it to my folks. Their reaction turned into pretty lots, something I'd greater than double my money by means of promoting it. The region includes 3 lots with killer views and is at the quit of a private street, but I'll possibly watch for some time to promote doing so. Now might be an emotional selection. My sisters and I are not currently talking, and I have no plans to initiate touch. I do not know what the reputation among them and my oldsters is, and I don't want to. At the upside, we spent an evening with my folks closing. Week went to a brand new eating place that turned into first class. No person brought up any of this crap. Mom did update us at the nieces and nephews she's spending time with, them at their homes. Sorry, this update isn't full of guffaws or owns. It's simply life now and again. Replace put up for October 16th, 2023. 1 month later, a couple of people have asked for an update. Here you go. I hired a man to look over the holiday domestic. He lives in the region, looks after his parents, and manages an excellent wide variety of properties. Some are holiday leases, a few are weekend places like ours. He has access to my camera feeds and does a physical. Take a look at the every week, or I assume he may additionally have the first-class process within the mountains. He receives paid to drive around together with his dog, walk around the homes, and hangs out on humans' decks on every occasion he feels like it. He also has a camera feed from a house near the start of the private road that takes nevertheless pictures every time an automobile goes past it. $450 in step with month plus. He will do primary upkeep and upkeep on an hourly basis. He's friends with all the sheriff's deputies too. Got numerous peace of mind from doing this, and he sends pics from his walks to everybody a couple of times per week. I have to brag a piece on my parents. I got all this from them tonight at dinner. They had been getting strained for my sisters to call for that. I open up the holiday house to everybody for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving up there had end up pretty. The culture for the own family no longer for me or my spouse. We've long passed once in years. My dad refused to bother me about it because he knew I'd say no. They came up with what I assume is a remarkable plan, announced that they were organizing the Thanksgiving gathering, and if all people cut up the cost earlier, they'd hire an Airbnb inside the mountains, in any other case that they had host Thanksgiving at their area, or one of the sisters should host it. This brought about a combat between the sisters, due to the fact the center sister became thinking about doing the Airbnb, but the oldest one doesn't have any cash. The deadline to commit to the Airbnb has passed. Looks like Thanksgiving will be at my parents' location. Regardless, we might not be there. My dad and mom have requested that we now not sell the vicinity for. Now they determined they'd nonetheless like to apply it from time to time, but now not until my sisters have come to phrases with the new everyday. And of course that they had possibly love it, if all people may want to get collectively there again. Down the street, however, it really is simply now not going to take place. I'd just as quickly sell it and pass on at this factor, but I can live with preserving it if my folks do use it occasionally, plus it is going to be well worth even more down. The road wife and I actually have stayed no touch with my sisters and their husbands. Both sisters have called from new numbers FU Google Voice, and left messages insisting that I meet with them for our parents' sake to work out how anybody can use the family vacation domestic they called my spouse too. I'm satisfied I changed into already inside the addiction of not answering calls. If I don't understand the quantity, I surely do not know if they're delusional or in the event that they assume they can bully me into giving them access again. Don't in reality care. My mother and father tell me that the oldest sister and her husband are becoming out of the rentals for his or her SUV and large-ass truck and are promoting their jet, skis, and a few other. They've by no means wish this is going to be genuinely hard on her. She's quite the braggart and won't like being seen in something older, smaller, less expensive. My Bill's identification could be very lots wrapped up with his truck as well. He even has a small tattoo of the Truck Enterprises emblem, which frankly is one of the many reasons why he and I by no means frolicked. Several people have suggested I make the vacation home into an Airbnb. I do not plan to achieve this, at least each time. Quickly, I understand it might make money. However, it might motive an awesome quantity of drama throughout the circle of relatives and might stress out my parents. They do not need that. It'd also be a hassle to eliminate. Non-public matters my oldsters have there, that stuff is nowhere to go, and there would be put on and tear on the vicinity. And I'm positive it'd take some quantity of time on my component. Even though I'd use a manager to do it, just no longer really. Worth it to me replaced post 5 November 27th, 2023 1. 5 months later wrote most of this the day gone by, but determined to wait to submit it till I wasn't so wound up ready didn't work. I'm still wound up, sorry if this rambles a lot has befell difficult to put in writing coherently, then have gone. To hell, I truly in reality did now not assume anything like this will occur. Short version, my brothers in regulation broke into my vacation home and have been arrested. They have been charged with breaking and entering destruction of property and speaking threats, all magnificence. 1 misdemeanors I've refused to drop the prices. I may do so, if I'm fully paid for the harm they induced. They were nevertheless in prison. As of Saturday nighttime, I anticipate they are out by now. Matters had settled down as a minimum. I notion so have not seen or heard from my sisters in over 6 weeks. My dad and mom went as much as the residence for every week and had a great time. David, the property manager I hired, has labored out, notable. He's completed multiple maintenance I asked him to do, and I've given him a listing that he's going to work on. He typically sends a photo or of wildlife or a sunset to his customers each week, become kind of making me want to stand up there Friday after Thanksgiving. My bills went to my excursion domestic. They used a perspective grinder to cut through the chain at the driveway gate and damage the gate in the process. They attempted to get in through the front door, ruined the lock set, and gouged the door badly. They, sooner or later, got in via the software ground door and a locked inner door. In addition, they broke into the barn. I'm no longer certain why once they went out via where they had been met with the aid of sheriff's deputies, and David gets notifications from the camera system when there may be pastime. He saw what turned into going on and called the sheriff's department consistent with David the payments. Tried to their manner out of it, however, the deputies didn't purchase it. Breaking into an empty residence is a pretty critical element up there. Normally it's meth heads who ransack the place and hawk the whole lot when the bills had been arrested. They freaked out big time, have been announcing how they had been going to beat the hell out of me, etc. No longer smart to do in front of law enforcement officials. David and the sheriff's office attempted calling my wife and me to look what we wanted to do. But we were spending the day with her mother and father and had left our telephones inside the car so we might be in vacation mode. So they booked the payments on the whole thing, which is what I would have asked them to do besides. Payments called their wives from prison, who have route freaked out. They called my parents, attempted to name me, they're blocked, attempted to discover a lawyer up there to arrange bail, now not smooth to do, given that it's a rural location, and changed into a holiday weekend. Older sister has 0 coins, and her cards are maxed out. So in the event that they made bail, my center sister could have had to pay. For both husband, I understand they had been nonetheless in jail, as of Saturday afternoon. We didn't take a look at our phones until past due Friday on the way. Domestic from the in-laws, there had been a ton of calls and messages from my mother, Dad David, and the sheriff's department talk about ruining an exquisite day. I become in one of these proper mood, until I looked at my smartphone, my wife examined through the texts, and listened to messages. Examined them out to me, and by the time we were given domestic, I had some concept of what become happening. I positioned my mind back into thinking mode, tried to get past my anger failed, called David, and were given the rundown on what had came about, and how horrific the damage became resulting in extra anger. I ended Friday with the aid of calling the sheriff's branch and telling them there was no false impression the bills had without a doubt no right to be on my property, and I desired to press prices. I failed to call my parents back. Barely slept. I waited until Saturday afternoon to call my oldsters. They were both quite rattled about all of it. My mother, specifically my sisters, had forehead beat them into telling me I should tell the law enforcement officials. It turned into all a mistake, and that I desired the costs dropped. I refused. Flat out advised them there was no manner I'd try this till I spoke with a legal professional. And additionally now, not till I turned into paid in full for whatever it will cost to restoration. The whole thing 100%. My mom turned into crying tough by the point we were given off the cell phone, which of path made me feel like my dad counseled. It become time for a whole begin over, but additionally said he idea they had to pay for the harm. I have not long gone up to the belongings, but there is not anything I can do, and I'll probably pass nuts when I see the harm in man or woman. The images are horrific enough. I'm hoping to tomorrow or Wednesday. However, my process isn't one I can simply wander away from for non-emergencies. I've left messages with 2 attorneys, pals, asking them to endorse the proper attorneys to move after my sisters and bills. I don't know what I can do precisely. However, I'm hoping to get restraining orders. I actually have all the texts they've sent me that could assist. I'm strongly considering suing them for the cash they made renting the place. I don't care about the cash. However, it's going to help cause them to as depressing as viable. The gloves are simply off at this point. A couple of side notes. 1, bills had no concept. I'd employed someone to hold a watch on things, or that there are cameras there now. My mother and father knew, however, hadn't told them, due to the fact they knew it might simply give my sisters a purpose to drama up. There are signs at the property, declaring it as being monitored with cameras and no trespassing symptoms. Though my spouse has absolutely had it at this factor, I don't blame her. She's been greater than affected person about it all. However, she reached her restriction and became no longer shy, approximately letting me recognize. She told me it is up to me how I deal with this. However, that she thought all of them had to learn a difficult lesson. Older Bill probable won't face any repercussions at his task over this, however. Center invoice has a protection clearance, so he may, I'm hoping with a view to be motivation for middle Bill to pay for the damages himself. Right now 4. David the caretaker has a thrilling historical past. I knew he become pals with a number of the deputies, figured it become. Because they have been all locals, I changed into incorrect. He changed into a cop in a big city for years, changed into shot on responsibility, and afterwards decided to stop and moved to wherein his parents had. Retired. He has some PTSD over it all. His canine is a licensed provider animal and is typically with him. I realize regulation enforcement human beings have a tendency to dangle together. I bet that is how they became his buddy institution. 5. I don't want to look or speak with these a-holes. For the relaxation of my lifestyles, I know that is in direct conflict with my overwhelming urge to make their lives as depressing as possible. Relevant remark: a variety of humans have said I must were difficult. Ask approximately all of this from day one. I've prevented it because it'd have burdened out my dad and mom, and I hate this sort of drama. However, F it, they're harassed out now. My spouse is pretty much opted out of any more to do with this, doesn't need to listen about it for some time, and says it is in my lap. She leaves off on that, but I'm guessing she's no longer going to get concerned any further, other than being attentive to me, blow off, steam edit. Regarding why they broke in, conjecture on my element, but I assume they have been making plans on the usage of it for own family getaways, and are renting it out once more in keeping with David the belonging supervisor. It is deer season via the end of the year. I recognize the bills. Have used it inside the past as base camp for large organizations searching weeks. It sleeps pretty a few human beings, so one occasion with pals could internet them lots of greenbacks once more. I'm guessing right here, but that might explain why. They broke into the barn as well. I sold a 6-seater mule a few years lower back and they may not use that. I do not think they desired to trash the place. It weigh an excessive amount of to my dad. And that they both like him. Plenty update post. 6th of December 2nd, 2023. 5 days later. December 2nd, 2023. Saturday didn't assume I'd be doing any other post this quickly, but a lot has came about during the last 2 days. Brief version: I assume the Nook has been became in this crap Thursday afternoon. I were given a courier-introduced envelope at my workplace and it turned into a signed letter from each my brother's-in-law and a cashier take a look at for $5.00 within the letter they made. What I have to say became a clearly honest apology amongst different matters. They mentioned breaking in. Mentioned it became wrong. Said the $5,000 became to pay for the damage, and they'd pay greater if it price. Greater than that still stated that they had lived far from the vacation domestic, until my wife and I especially invited them. They also asked that I do what should to get the costs dropped as soon as viable due to the fact they both could lose their jobs and they'd agree to a restraining order or anything else it took for that to take place. There has been more as well, all conciliatory. However, that is the gist of it. To mention this became a surprise is a real understatement. It became glaringly a total 180 from there beyond behavior. I'd already made an appointment with a legal professional to see about suing my bills over the damage and to try and get a restraining order I referred to as him and advised him what I just received, and he agreed to meet with me on the quit of the day. Instead of subsequent week, told me not to deposit the check. We met for about 2 hours. He ended up recommending the wife, and that I do a agreement and mutual release. Settlement with all 4 of them sisters and payments. He stated if we went after them through a lawsuit that we might almost honestly win, but that it may take 2 years or more, there would be considerable in advance legal prices and that we'd never see any money. He additionally stated we should preserve the $5 loose and clean, even supposing we didn't let them off the hook. He is drawing up the agreement. It may not be ready till Monday. The agreement will consist of what is basically the civil equivalent of a restraining order. I'd already asked my belongings manager to work up a bid to get the damage repaired. I called him after the assembly and requested that he get me as close an estimate as viable ASAP were given that Friday. He thinks it'll take around $4,000 to repair the whole lot. Most of that is for the front door. On Friday, my legal professional contacted every of the payments, informed them what we have been providing, and recommended them to get their personal lawyers. They each agreed to it. The middle bill advised them they may come up with the money for it to both pay for the damages or pay for an attorney, but not both, and that they figured a legal professional wouldn't make any difference for the reason that they virtually had no protection for what they did. His biggest challenge changed into if the expenses will be dropped. From what I can tell, they're inclined to do whatever, sign anything to make this all depart. My legal professional, also known as the DA's office, on Friday to discuss brushing off the charges, got the call of the prosecutor and left them a message. However, has now not spoken to them. But he thinks they may brush aside the charges due to the fact the payments are paying up and they have no priors. But alternatively, he's not a crook attorney also. Said I ought to be prepared to force up there Monday or Tuesday, and the prosecutor in person that I want everything disregarded. He has additionally cautioned me to remain no contact with sisters and bills, especially for the next 6 months, and that it'll be absolutely critical to comply with the terms of the settlement on the subject of future interactions with them. I'm guessing that the bill's alternate of coronary heart is because of them having discovered what's at stake for them. What? It's going to fee them in prison expenses and fines and so forth. There's additionally the fairly not likely possibility that they could go to jail for as much as 120 days. And as I've cited, one of them has a protection clearance. For his task, that would be at chance. So that is their Hail Mary pass to preserve their regular lives. This isn't a perfect resolution to the state of affairs. However, at least it'll get me past the legal and monetary component part of the display that I've been in for the past few months. I doubt I'll ever have a civil relationship with any of them ever again. And that's satisfactory. What I need maximum at this factor is to shut this off, get on with my life, and by no means talk to any of them once more. I'm exhausted from this. Wife feels pretty a great deal the same manner type of a facet problem, but getting the written apology was weirdly a big second for me. I wasn't waiting for that ever. However, apparently it matters to me quite. A chunk the cash doesn't sense in particular. Vital at this second. I'll damn positive take it. Even though additionally, I'm pretty certain my middle sister and her husband came up with the money. The cashier's test is from the credit score. union of the agency he works for as soon as things are signed. I plan to make one greater update likely. Just an edit to this submit. I'm sorry for being so pedantic. Writing those posts has helped clear my head, and the feedback has genuinely helped. I certainly admire everybody's remarks, insights, and assist, and I certainly simply hope none of you ever must move this type of nonsense applicable comment, to be honest. After I eventually got home Thursday nighttime, I cried from relief, wondering, this could all be over. I'm now not going to discuss this agreement with my parents till it is signed via all and sundry. My sister's payments can if they want to, but I'm not. It is among me and them. Final replace, December 7th, 2023, 5 days later. Tuesday morning, I met with my legal professional, went over the settlement, changed more than one minor matters, and he sent it to my sisters and brothers-in-law. It blanketed a requirement that they pay my legal professional's price about $3,000. They weren't glad about that and tried to negotiate it away, but he advised them they both take delivery of it as is, or there might be no deal at all, and we might proceed with suing them for the cash they got from renting out the vicinity, put on and tear from renting it, repair costs from their break-in, emotional misery, misplaced earnings from having to address this lawyer expenses, and anything else we ought to. He additionally instructed them I would push difficult with the DA's workplace to prosecute each fee. Short version, they came in and sign I wasn't there. I'm told it turned into a pretty disturbing environment that the middle bill regarded to have taken fee, and that at one factor, he informed both of my sisters to shut the hell up, or he turned into strolling far from everything, making his personal cope with us, and the relaxation of them ought to all go to hell. They supplied any other cashier check for $500, claimed this is all they had, it is close enough. That we're going to receive it as the very last price. Legal professional additionally advised me that everyone become very cold and curt toward one another, but that they all managed to maintain it collectively, lengthy sufficient to signal, and left without making too big of a scene. I drove up to the vacation house early the previous day to test out the harm and meet with the DA's office. Seeing the damage made my blood boil. It was so mindless, I was so pissed that I was equipped to consume the price of maintenance and do the whole lot I could to break their lives. Tried taking walks it off, failed. Totally ended up calling a good friend who become type enough to live at the smartphone for over an hour, letting me spew and vent. He eventually were given. Me returned to that specialize in the bigger picture of putting this in the back of me and getting on with my life. Truly, I'm nevertheless now not certain that's what I want to do. However, I settled down enough to get a few food in me, and I felt better. After lunch, I went. His workplace hadn't made an appointment and had to wait a while. However, got to meet with the assistant DA, were given the case. Short model is that for the reason that I don't want to prosecute, and the bills have already paid for the damages, that they're inclined to drop all of the expenses besides trespassing, which in this example could be a class 2 misdemeanor. The invoice should plead responsible and pay some thing first class. The decide sets, I'm also instructed that in the event that they fight the trespassing fee, or ever so much as fart in public up there, that it would cross very poorly for them. It helped that the payments didn't withstand arrest. In the event that they had, none of the fees would have been dropped. I additionally went via the sheriff's office to thank them for getting there so speedy. And the whole thing wanted to thank the deputies in my view. But simplest spoke to the dispatch person, and I attempted to fulfill up with David, the belonging supervisor, but couldn't get hold of him. Multiple notes, the settlement consists of a no-touch clause. Essentially, if any of them show up where my wife or I are, or the alternative manner, around whoever got their closing has to depart right now. No contact besides through lawyers or different together agreed upon third events. They get to keep something they crafted from renting the holiday residence, my large supply, unless I even have tax consequences which they may be liable for, and we release each different from all other liabilities up via the prevailing. There is extra to it than that. But those are the excessive points. Wife and I will signal the agreement later today after. That I cannot communicate approximately most of this, however I can communicate around it. I assume that is my final replace regarding all this nonsense. However, I'll respond to remarks if I can. As I've said earlier, than posting about all of this, and studying Oldster's mind and responses has been truly beneficial, and might be been key in my being able to cope with this in a surprisingly healthful way. So thank you all again. Applicable remarks. I had a difficult time no longer being vindictive, but proper now. I'm glad I wasn't. If they motive more drama down the street, I'll probably regret it. However, if they observe the settlement, it won't manifest. The family dynamics are such as you said. Quite much effed. I've best advised my dad and mom that we seeking to paintings things out, not anything more. They'll or may not be K with the manner matters could be shifting forward, but I had to do what changed into best for my spouse, and I'm guessing that my sisters have advised them a very slanted version. It really is just one extra turd. I'll must swim around. Surely the agreement is more a formalization of ways matters were. For the last few months I are aware of, it's now not how my parents desired matters to move. However, I'm quite satisfied with it. Have your sisters ever shown this stage of entitlement earlier than no longer? Definitely not closer to me anyway. We used to be okay, in no way very near, but not enemies. Searching return, they started out to resent me when I sold loft when I become 25. At that factor, neither of them owned a domestic. However, each had met their destiny, husbands. They definitely did not like that were given a place earlier than they did. It got worse when I met my spouse. They did not like that she turned into a part of a rich-owned family, particularly on the grounds that I became doing quite well. By then, myself accused me of being elitist and such. When we got married, I moved in with my spouse. Her apartment changed into near in which she was doing her fellowship, and I sold the loft. Our wedding ceremony turned into fancy, but reasonable. However, the sisters had been, without a doubt, resentful about it. After that, they and their husbands got pretty petty and we started out minimizing our involvement with them. The take advantage of selling the loft, being frugal, and now not having a house price are what enabled me to buy the vacation domestic for my mother and father. My oldsters had been with hiding the reality that I owned it rather than them, because they knew my sisters might be about it, and say that I changed into using my spouse's money. I did not. Maximum of our finances are separate, even though it surely helped that I did not have a residence price up. Till this crap commenced, I virtually idea we were okay. Within the standard feel our day-by-day lives had been are very different, and I can't I enjoy being around them for extra than half of a day, but I did not assume they hated me. I did understand that each sisters had emerged as quite spoiled and titled. But it wasn't my difficulty, and I didn't have any real conflicts with my brothers in regulation either. Simply almost nothing in commonplace with them. God, I bet this is a long-winded way of announcing I did not know they had been all such one final concept. My small myth at this factor is that I by